Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coffee with Coaches podcast. I'm your usual host, Kevin, and today I have with me Craig French. Craig teaches mindset techniques and habits that allow individuals to access their potential, meet their goals, and create happiness. He helps people optimize their lives by increasing self-awareness, developing healthy routines, and teaching meditation. His clients range from individuals to couples, businesses to leaders, and sports teams as well. Craig, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to talk about all of that.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's first of all, we'll begin at the beginning. Let's talk about your superhero origin story, as I sometimes like to call it. How did you get started in coaching? How did you realize that maybe you already were a coach? Did someone tell you that, hey, you should do this for a living? You're great at this, or did you? And then, what prompted you to go from there, that realization, into starting a coaching practice for yourself?
Yeah, I think this was sort of in the stars for me. Early on as a young kid, I was always playing sports and always sort of prided myself and showed signs of being a natural leader. A lot of times was captain, and a lot of the kids on my team would sort of look to me for direction and advice. And a lot of friends, as I got a little bit older, middle school, high school, would come to me for advice and, life questions. So it felt like a natural sort of progression for me. And, like all of us, we go through, the journey of life. And if we're paying attention, we're noticing maybe some commonalities or aha moments or, little winks, if you will, and piecing all together. And I was like, all right, I think this actually makes sense. I could combine all of my experiences into one sort of cohesive system and coaching technique.
Nice. I love that you pointed that out, actually, because there really is, I've referred to it. I think of it. I've had conversations about it where it just feels like the universe, life, whatever, there's just constantly kind of talking to you. And those moments when you're able to either stop and listen or put it all together and be like, oh, and all of a sudden it's almost like looking at a language you don't speak. And it's all of a sudden the words just kind of move around and snap into place. And you're like, oh, I understand this completely. This is what I should be doing. This is what I maybe already am doing. Yeah. And it really is like, it's both a long process and also like a lightning bolt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually refer to that similar story a lot with my books. It's like, I always find myself reading a book and there's a weird synchronicity. Like, it doesn't happen every book I read, obviously, but it happens pretty often. And I usually just smile a little bit, and I've kind of gotten out of the habit of telling people because it gets lost a little bit in translation. I kind of just smile to myself and say, okay, it's another little sign that I'm on the right path, or that things are aligning. So I totally agree with you.
Nice. Yeah, it really does. I often find myself using the word momentum. Like, in my head, I think of it almost like a train on rails, because there's this idea that you've basically snapped into place. You can move. It's an imperfect analogy, like most are, but there's this snapping into place where you're like, oh, this direction, this is it, and you're pretty much on rails. And there's this like momentum that just carries you as you go. It really is a great feeling, and I feel like, well, actually, I know every coach I talk to, and I've talked to quite almost 100 at this point, they basically practice what they preach. They've experienced what they're trying to share with others, that sense of, and when a coach, every one of them, like when they see it dawn on someone's face, that moment where it snaps into place and they can feel this momentum, this potential for energy that they haven't felt before. It's like they look back on that and they're like, that's why I got into coaching, because I saw on their face what I felt in my heart.
Yeah, when you see that little sort of light bulb go off for your clients, what I mean, or people you're coaching, it's a very rewarding experience for sure.
Let's talk about what's rewarding you in the present day. I know you have a lot going on in life, but I've been workshopping different ways to ask this question, and I've kind of boiled it down to who do you coach and how do you coach them? The who being, is there any particular type of person who's in a particular stage of their life, whether it's personal or professional, both and, either or. And then the how do you coach them? Are you primarily one-to-one? Do you do small group coaching, maybe medium to larger group coaching, where it's more like, large teams where you're like coaching from a stage? Obviously you write books, so there's always coaching through authorship. So yeah, who do you coach and how do you coach them?
Yeah, I'm almost exclusively doing corporate coaching at the moment right now. So I still do some one-on-one engagements. If people reach out to me through referrals, or, I'm not actively pursuing one-on-one clients. So I am almost exclusively working in the corporate setting, and my specialty is in the sales sort of arena. So any kind of like revenue responsible role. It could be customer service, it could be account management, but also a lot of like new revenue roles like account executives, you know what I mean? And sales development reps. Because I've been doing that myself for about 20 years. And, it's such a mental strain on carrying quotas and hitting, key performance indicators, and, the pressure of investors and boards, and, and just the natural changing environment, the competitive landscape, and also rejection too. I'm very passionate about the mental toll that rejection, plays on us. When you're in sales, you're getting told no, potentially many times a day. And, if you stop and think about it, it's not that natural for a human to be told no that frequently and that often. So there's a lot of mindset coaching that needs to happen around that for people to, be okay with that. And obviously some people, as they get older in their career, they've learned to sort of just deal with it through experience. But there's also a way to sort of get people in the earlier stage of their career and train them and give them tools and techniques to deal with it, so they can have a longer, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. That's very powerful. That's really the whole concept around no, and not just no, but that rejection and the way in which you handle it. Because it's like, I know like there's like 101 version of it where like rejection feels like whole. It feels like when someone tells you no, regardless of what it's for, whether it's personally, professionally, whether it's huge, whether it's would you like a second helping of mashed potatoes, and you get a no. It's frightfully easy to interpret that as a complete rejection of your entire existence. And you don't think of it that way because you say it out loud and it sounds absurd that you would do that, but human beings have some well-worn grooves when it comes to how we process rejection. And yeah, there are a couple of industries in particular where you have to traffic in no's, in rejection on a daily basis. And if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the techniques, the experience comes obviously, and that helps too. But if you don't have those skills and techniques, you put yourself in some real danger of carrying the weight of that rejection around with you as you go. And it builds up over time. And I love that you focus on that, because that's such an underserved element of professional skill.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, there's a couple of things to touch on there. One is that after doing some research on this topic, I mean, one of the things, Kevin, is that we actually are hardwired to have a visceral effect on rejection. And it goes back to sort of like our primitive brain, because when we were hunter-gatherers and living in little smaller tribal communities, if you got rejected from your pack or from, your group, that means basically you were ostracized and you were sent out on your own into the middle of nowhere to fend for yourself and hunt and keep yourself warm. Whereas obviously if you were in the community, you had more safety, more food, more camaraderie, more connection, more love, support. So there's something hardwired in our brain about this thing about rejection. And so it's a pretty, I don't know if fascinating is the right word, because it obviously has a little bit of a sad connotation to it, but I think it's something really, really, really important, especially in the modern sort of commerce driven capitalistic, society that we live in.
Yeah. Fascinating is an element of it. It's not only fascinating because it also carries a lot of weight. There's damage, there's trauma, there's sadness, but it is fascinating. And it's also, and I think you rightly represent this in your coaching, it is also fertile ground for positive change and growth. And that's a transition that can be difficult to make, where you realize that these no's, this rejection is an opportunity to grow skills that will help not just you, but everyone you come into contact with in your life be able to process that kind of negativity. And I put negativity in air quotes, even though we're, audio only podcast. I'm scare quoting on the screen because it's defined almost universally as a negative when you get a no, when you get a rejection, but there is so much that can grow out of that. And if you have the skills and the tools.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I just finished rereading a book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman.
Yeah.
I read it about 20 years ago and I just reread it. And I also just took a course with him on emotional intelligence. And one of the things that he says about in relation to sales and this topic that we're discussing is that someone in sales who's naturally optimistic, which usually starts off in childhood, early stages of childhood, they have not only a longer career in sales, but they usually produce and perform at a higher rate than pessimists because you have to be able to turn those no's into yeses. You have to turn those rejections into silver linings and opportunities, you know what I mean? Like you were just describing. So there is an element of optimism too when it comes to rejection. They kind of work together and they could become gold, you know what I mean, for future growth if you allow it to.
I love that. Alchemy. I often reference that lead to gold.
Exactly.
It's a science. It's a science we couldn't quite ever crack, but turning the lead of a no into the gold of a yes, or the gold of a positive, is something that we know a lot more about than we think we do.
Totally.
Man, this is such a meaty subject and there's so many facets to explore. I could talk about this for hours with you, but we're already coming up on time. So I want to make sure that you get a chance to tell the audience kind of a two-part question. Where can people find out more about you? And where do you like to engage online? Do you have a preferred social media or a preferred method for people to reach out and get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way for people to find me is my website, my personal website. It's craigjaredfrench.com. So it's CraigJaredFrench.com. I am just in the process of launching a new corporate coaching business called System with an OM at the end. So it's sort of my system with, you know, the sound of the universe, the OM sound.
Nice. I like
And
that.
thank you. And I'm getting quite a bit of traction with it right now. So there will be a whole website launching around that. Right now, I currently have, you know, a corporate deck that I could share with your audience if people want to reach out and get the new System corporate deck, which is focusing on sort of this performance mindset around sales and revenue roles. So if anyone listening is interested in hearing more about that, they could reach out to me directly through my website. My personal email is cjf@craigjaredfrench.com.
Nice. Simple and effective. And are you active anywhere on social media, or do you just not have time for that these days?
Well, just glossed over that question. To be honest with you, Kevin, like that is a part of the strategy, like future strategy. I'm not spending a ton of time. I am on Instagram as Craig Jared French. I'm on Facebook. Those are probably the two main ones, but a lot of my business is coming through, you know, either outreach that I'm doing through my network or referrals. So the social media, I'm taking an opposite approach as most coaches, I think, and like that's more of like a secondary byproduct of hopefully positive momentum, to use your word again, you know what I mean? As opposed to pounding social media and being super out there and active, it's more of a passive approach to it.
Yeah, a little passive, a little organic. When as things develop and become present and get their own momentum, that will naturally radiate out to all of the channels on which you exist. And so wherever you are, it will go there.
Yeah, exactly. I do find that some coaches put a lot of emphasis on the social first, you know, before the substance. And so I'm sort of doing it the opposite.
All right. I like it. Craig, thank you so much for being here today. It was really fun to talk to you. And I'm going to be wishing that we could talk for longer all day. Maybe I'll have to have you back for a part 2 or something.
I'll be happy. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to the audience out there, find Craig, learn more, reach out if you like this conversation. And I think you did. Just find out more. You know, maybe reach out on social media. He might get back to you. Who knows? But definitely find out more. There's a lot of good stuff here. And we'll talk to you again soon.